Hi, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this podcast episode. I'm Barry Lee Cummings here with Beat the Cyberbully, and I'm joined on this episode by Maz Wyllie. Hi, Maz, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
good to be here.
Yes, indeed. I'm looking forward to this because we planned this after a conversation that we had on your balcony a couple of weeks ago. And I'm really interested to get into this because we're going to be talking about technology. We're going to be talking about the pros and cons. And you're going to be almost coming at it from the not negative, but the no camp. And I'm going to be coming at it from the yes camp to a certain extent, but we'll get into that. But before we get into that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your history, and what you're doing now as to why we're then having this conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I've spent my life working to promote and emphasize the correlation between physical and mental health. And I think what's fantastic is one of the great things that's come out of COVID is a lot more awareness of mental health and also the impact that physical and mental health have together. So I've done a lot of work with things like sports therapy, adventure therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and is really looking at the holistic person. My main aim is creating resilience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, health is so holistic, but we can create resilience to both physical and mental issues. So I now run an organization called Life is for Living, which is taken from my motto in life, and I think an attitude that I think we all need to have. We are health. Specializing in health promotion. So we're empowering holistic health and preventing burnout. And burnout is such a big topic in this day and age, and it's affecting everybody. Everybody is vulnerable. So
Yeah, indeed.
yeah,
And I think that it's really important that the first thing that you also come from a teaching background, so you've had that exposure to young people in that format and that arena, and that your business now, Life is for Living, is driven around helping that next generation come through as well. I mean, you do help adults and so forth as well, but am I right in
absolutely.
saying that the core focus is on the younger generation?
Yeah, so I work with corporates, I work with students, and I work with families as well. So yes.
Yeah. And I think that's where our correlation also comes in, because I think that one of the things that we talked about previously is this idea with Beat the Cyber, where we're coming at it from an awareness perspective around the digital space. And we
Yeah.
go into these sessions and we talk to families, and we talk to students as well. So there's that crossover. And what we try to emphasize is that the screen is here, and we're going to get into this a little bit more now, and there's not really getting away from it, but we still want to strive for balance. And one of the things that we suggest is getting away from that screen. But then the next natural question is, and do what, Barry? What do you suggest that
Mm,
we do with our children?
yeah.
And this is where the
Yeah.
conversation that we had and your involvement in
Yeah.
adventure and outdoor, there's a huge, say, well, here's the lady to talk to Maz,
Yeah.
because and also just tell me a bit about that, because I think there's not many people doing this, but you will actually come to an individual family and set up a program for them. Is that right? Can you or explain a bit further?
Absolutely. So one of the areas I've worked in the past, and one of the big issues that we have today, is disconnected families. I mean, disconnected people, full stop. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from our friends. But most importantly, especially for young people, we are incredibly disconnected from our families. So many people are living in the same house as their brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and they don't know each other. And this is no criticism. It is a way of life for today. So I use a lot of different tools, from cognitive behavioral therapy, action learning, to adventure therapy, sport therapy, to help people to see themselves differently and to see other people differently, and change the communication systems within a group, and then thus change the way people interact together. And it can be incredibly powerful. I think what is so powerful about the service that I provide is the mix of tools. I mean, adventure therapy on its own is amazing. I mean, I've done a lot of work with young offenders, kids with serious illnesses, kids with disabilities, using all of these tools and put together, it is life-changing, and it can be incredibly powerful. So yeah, I think unfortunately there's a big need there.
Well,
so yeah.
there is definitely, because again, this is when we had our first conversation, and the word disconnected, and I said, the first slide on my presentation to parents is in the most connected time in history. We're the most disconnected as humans, and
absolutely,
we've been drawn into the screen. COVID has amplified that 1,000 times and driven everybody into it. But you see families out at dinner around a table, and as you said, they're all looking at a screen. And again, this conversation that we're having, I'm very clear to students when I talk to them as well, and also mums and dads, that I'm not anti-technology, I'm not anti-screen, I'm not anti-social media. I'm advocating for appropriate, as safe as possible usage of that, and still striving for some sort of balance. And it's getting harder and harder because of the way that the education system is going now. Bring your own device, and a lot of work is done on these devices. But that's why it's even more important for mums and dads to be on the ball, to say, okay, this is the line, and this is where, yes, you need it for your homework. Yes, you can do X, Y, Z on it. Yes, there's going to be time for gaming maybe, or some communication and social media, depending on your age. But this is the line. And then how do we enforce that line? And again, to come back to the real crossover point and say, well, what else can we do when our children especially are saying, but my life is online. Everything I know and everything I do is on that screen, and it's through Snapchat, and it's through Instagram, it's through TikTok, it's through YouTube. And to lots of mums and dads, myself included in this, you look at it and think, oh, but why? It's not, I don't get it. And I think that's a big part of the problem, and a big part of what we're doing today with this podcast episode is to try and share some of that information, because a lot of mums and dads I talk to are coming at this from an angle of lack of awareness of our understanding. And that's why I don't get it kind of faces. I don't understand. Why would my 8-year-old, A, want TikTok, and B, if they got it, how can they, if allowed, they would spend 24 hours and not go to sleep, not even go to the bathroom, not eat, and scroll through that screen. And I think a big part of that is for us to, well, what we try to do with Beat the Cyberbully is to try and show why it's important for mums and dads to get a bit more involved in our opinion. And again, I'd be interested to hear your view on this in terms of this whole idea of the disconnected family unit. What have you seen from that side of things in terms of the generational divide? How does that play into this?
I think it's a really hard one. And I think there's a lot of different things that are going on. One of the things that's really struck me is this idea of people in the same household not knowing each other. And we have so little time today. We're living in this world that is so pressured. We are, we have to be doing this, we have to be doing that. We're running around left, right, and center. And very few families will sit down and have a meal together every day. Now, one phenomenon that I absolutely and am adamant on is that as people, we change every single day. We are a different person at the end of each day. And this is especially, this applies to adults as well, but it's especially important for children, because this is the time when children and young people are really developing their personality. However, if we are not sitting down with our kids every day, if we're not talking on an open level with our kids, if we're not creating a level of trust where our kids can talk to us and feel that we are actually interested in them, and I think that's crucial, we're not going to, on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, get to know who our kids actually are. And I think what is happening there, and I think there's a big problem globally, is that a lot of parents assume that their kids are the person they were 10, 15 years ago. And it gets to the point where the kids start becoming adults and feel very disconnected from their parents, because there is no understanding of who they actually are as a person. And I think that's something that needs to be a day-to-day, week-to-week process, getting to know, not just you getting to know your kids, but also allowing your kids to get to know you. Because yes, we go by the title of mum and dad, but actually, who is mum? Who is dad? And allowing a kid to have pride and respect for who their parents are, I think, is an enormous part of them growing up, and their identity.
Yeah, that's such a valid point, and it's got me thinking about it in my own context with my kids. I'm like, oh, yeah, I wonder how much, because we like you said, we're so busy doing and whatnot, and I know I can recall a couple of conversations around it, but it's not a common topic of conversation between my children about what I do, what mum does, and how we do it, and what that does. And I advocate for this communication as well around sitting down and having a meal. And within our family, my family in particular, we have breakfast together, we have dinner together, and it's a non-negotiable from that side of things, because I do believe that until we do that, and maybe it's not dinner or breakfast, but an allocated piece of time where it's a safe space for our children to talk to us, and I think for us as mums and dads in particular to do the hardest thing, which is be quiet and listen, and it's hard. But the more that we practice, like everything, the more that we allow and hold that space for our children. And it's not something that I've come up with. It's something I've seen that's been implemented by Kevin Hart, famous comedian and comedian. He does this, and he talked about it on one of his, I think, Instagram stories. And also a friend of mine who has built some parental control software. He's implemented this in his household for teenagers, interestingly enough, because I said, well, easy enough. I've got a 5 and a 3-year-old. It's they can protest, but they're still going to end up, sitting down if they want to eat. But once you get to the tween and teen years, you get a little bit more of this pushback and so forth. But he implemented it in his family unit to the point where he said, the first couple of dinners were really quiet. Nothing happened. Nothing was said, and everyone's like, because there's no screens, the phones are not allowed, no TV, no nothing. It's just us sat around the table. And then he said, then they started, okay, this is boring. I'm going to talk about something. And they start talking about menial things and this, that, and the other, to the point, though, because this is happening every day, that the habit forms very quickly, and that the topics that were discussed suddenly became bigger and bigger and bigger. The trust was built again. And as you said, I think really what was happening is they were getting to know each other, having been mum and dad from baby to tweens and teens. They suddenly were like, oh, who is this girl and who's this boy living in house, and like you said, vice versa. It's like, okay, well, that's mum and dad, but who are they? They don't seem to show any interest, to the point where he actually was downstairs in his office and said, to himself, he's like, I'm going to miss dinner tonight, I've got to do some work. And his kids came down and said, no, it's dinner time, it's our time upstairs, let's do this. And he said, okay, you're right, made the necessary arrangements, came upstairs, and he said it was maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks for that beginning of nothing being said to, hey, this is a big part of who we are as a family, let's go and do it. And I think it is very powerful, like you say, that we open the communication channels and let each other know who we are. And I'd never thought about it like that, but it's so true, that it takes it one step further from what I've been saying around this idea of communication. And I think this is where we also connected, is this idea of communication and education is so important to both of us as individuals, as Maz and Barry, but then as our businesses and our initiatives. It's this idea of how the only way to combat this problem is through communication and education. But how do we open that door on both sides is the real challenge right now to reconnect.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, there's so much in what you've just said. My brain is swirling. So I think one of the things immediately to respond to just what you've said is nothing we do is a habit until we practice it. And, how do we change it? We change it by practicing. That's the only way to make changes stick. The big word that you mentioned and have been talking about is the word listen. And listening is an enormous part of communication, but we've almost trained our civilization out of listening over the last few years as technology has taken over. One of the services that Life is for Living provides is action learning. And action learning is a tool which is, again, incredibly powerful. And it takes I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I mention the term unsolicited advice.
Absolutely.
And let's face it, we've all been a victim of unsolicited advice. And I'm sure we have all given unsolicited advice. And especially as parents, as parents, it's seen very much more as the parent's job to tell the child what to do rather than to listen. And that is necessary. Of course, at times it is necessary. However, it can be very damaging. And, on an adult to adult basis as well, unsolicited advice is set to be one of the most damaging parts of communication. Right. So action learning takes this concept of unsolicited advice, flips it over and turns it on its head. And it teaches people to communicate in a completely different way, which it empowers a person to think for themselves and come up with their own solution in a respectful team environment. And this can be applied within families as much as it can. It was actually a tool that was designed for businesses, so offices, workplaces, but it's incredibly powerful with young people. So we offer service to schools, universities, and colleges, which it doesn't just change the way people communicate; it changes the way people think. But it's incredibly powerful in families because rather than giving a child a solution, you can help the child open their mind and create the ability to provide their own solutions. And in doing that, you are creating this absolute wonder tool called resilience. You can't be next to your child giving them the answers all of their life. But if you use tools like this, you can give them the resilience to make their own powerful decisions. And it's life-changing. It really is.
It is. And I think it's the underpinning factor of what we try to also focus on is that it is about empowering young people to make the decisions themselves, empowering them to be able to overcome the situations they're going to find themselves in. And again, from a digital perspective, some of those scenarios are horrible. And as a parent, you are going to want to know about it, as uncomfortable it is. But to your point there, also understand how to approach that situation with your child, because in some cases they don't want the unsolicited advice of mum and dad blundering in there and going, right, this is how we're going to solve this. They just want us to listen. They want to vent. Absolutely. They want to get it out there. And are we able to practice saying, okay, I've heard you. What do you want to do about that? And if they turn around and say nothing right now, Dad, then that's the answer.
Okay.
Nothing. Okay. Fantastic. And it will churn you up inside as a mom and dad going, I can't. Having just heard what you said to me, that must mean that you are in pain somewhere, either psychologically or emotionally. And as a parent, I can't, I find it very difficult to then not, try and jump in and do the hug or fix the problem and make you happy again. But as we've seen over and over again, and the research is coming out, is that they don't always want that. In fact, they don't want us to always do that. They want to be able to talk to us. And we talked about this before, the video that Gary V put out there of a woman asking how to protect her daughter in the online space. And his answer was, build her self-esteem to the point where she can get over all of these things, or will not be drawn into these situations, or will not, fall for some of the scams and the so forth. And it was when we both talked about something that when I saw that the first time, it really resonated with me. I said, that is it. That's the only way to do this, because coming back to, I guess, the original idea of this conversation was that the technology is here. Yeah. And as much as you may not like it and don't like the impact of it, it's happening. And again, we're coming at it from different angles, but we're on the same page as well. Because
absolutely.
I'm in the digital world. My businesses revolve around the technology, and I've seen and I've built businesses using the technology, and I use those positive examples and stories to talk to young people about, because it's a choice. At the end of the day. And there are young people choosing to do amazing, incredible things with the TikToks and YouTubes and all of these channels. And then there's others that are not choosing to do that. And it's the same technology.
Just to come in very quickly, just to explain to anybody listening. So you are very much geared towards using technology safely. And as part of the values of Life is for Living, we have set up to deliver workshops and courses as screen-free as possible. And that doesn't mean we're not going to use technology. One-to-one coaching sessions, of course, might have to be, through Zoom. But I think it's two different approaches, but to solve the same solution. Sorry, just to explain.
No, it's it's good actually, because it doesn't make sense, and this is also one of the discussion points, because I leverage the technology wherever I can, and I see the benefits of it. But I know that we had this initial discussion, and I find impactful is not the right word, but I find it more rewarding myself physically standing in front of an audience and delivering, because you get that feedback and so forth. But the last 3 years of COVID obviously prevented that from happening, and that right turn into technology and everybody becoming much more comfortable and familiar with this. And I know that even when I said, "Oh, we could do this and Zoom record it," you're like, "Oh, can we do it in person?" So well, we could, but it requires like a whole logistical episode in itself to get all the equipment and whatnot, whereas all we have to do in this case is click it on. And again, I'm not advocating that convenience is always the answer, especially when it comes to technology, because that's where we see a lot of these problems stemming from, especially with the younger children and mums and dads leaning on what we call the digital nanny, and plonking that iPhone or tablet or whatever it is in front of their child to keep them quiet. Originally for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, which turns into 30 minutes, turns into 40 minutes. And then suddenly we've got tweens and teens with addiction problems, and mum and dad telling myself, why? I don't understand. Well, if we work this back, there's very clear evidence to show why. I said this before, that, and some parents don't like that I say this, but when parents tell me, "Oh, I can't, my child won't eat without an iPad in front of them or an iPhone, or they won't do this, or they will scream and cry if I take it away from them," and saying, I do understand that, but at the same time, you're the parent, and therefore it's a learned behavior that they only eat when a tablet's in front of them, because they didn't come out with that. As much as we joke about this generation coming out with a screen, they didn't. And there was a period of time where...
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. Soon, perhaps. Hope not. But it's so true that then it's, and you see, especially around this part of the world, that you've got 6-month-olds, 3 months old in prams and strollers around the malls, and they're holding onto a screen. I remember when my two were younger, we'd go out for walks, and we'd pass other people, and they would have their baby. So they're going outside, and they're sat there with a 6-month-old holding a screen as we whiz past. And ours are looking at not necessarily much nature, but there are trees and stuff. And it just struck me that this is a problem.
That kind of leads quite strongly onto kind of one of my points. So I am not against technology. Don't get me wrong. It is an inevitable part of life. And it's also can be incredibly beneficial in many different ways, including health. What I am against is the abuse of technology. And unfortunately, most of us are abusing technology. And when I say abuse, I'm talking about overuse. And the impact that has on our health is enormous. You have the direct impact, such as the vision problems, the posture problems. But then you have the indirect, the lack of exercise, the bad diet, leading to diabetes. You've got the heart disease. And this comes back to one word, which we'll mention again and again and again, and it comes back to disconnection. And a big problem with our health as human beings at the moment is we are disconnected. We are disconnected from ourselves. We are disconnected from other people. We are absolutely disconnected from nature. And this is one of the things you were talking about. You go outside, take your kids for a walk, and they've got a screen in front of their face. The connection with nature is one of the most powerful remedies for our health that has been proved in science. We're disconnected from meaningful work. We're disconnected from wholesome food. There was a lovely thing on Facebook the other day that said, if there's a health food aisle in the supermarket, what does that say about the rest of the food? And yeah, great point. Absolutely great point. We are filling our bodies with absolute junk. And unfortunately, screen time is feeding into all of these disconnections. It's helping us to be more disconnected in every way, shape, and form. And the impact this is having on our stress levels. We as humans, I'm sure you're aware of the flight or fight phenomenon. So as human beings, many of us are living in this constant state of fear, where our adrenaline and cortisol levels inside our body are elevated most of the time. And this is incredibly damaging, and it's incredibly damaging for the brain, not just the body. So this is my concern. I am not against technology per se, but I think we are absolutely abusing technology, and the effect it's having on not just the health of an individual, but the health of humanity is a crisis as far as I'm concerned.
And I think that it's as much as we were billing this as coming at it from different points, is that in reality, I agree.
Absolutely.
It is having a problem, and a big part of what we're trying to do is to say, look, the technology is here, it's not going anywhere, but we need to understand how to use it in a balanced way, to not rely on it, and you're right, not to abuse it, and that starts, I think, with mum and dad, because we are not modeling the kind of behavior that we would actually want our children to mimic, because we have a bigger problem with it as they do. As much as many don't want to admit it, is that you just have to look around to see how many people are focused in on this thing. And we as parents and adults are, well, I've got to do it. I just need to message this, but I've got to do work. I'm working on this thing. And yes, there is those elements, but okay, how much of it is actually necessary? How much of it could you just excuse yourself from that situation? Because the damage I see doing is that we're doing it in front of our children. You've got your whole child in one hand and holding a thing, and they're looking at you going, oh, okay, so what's the thing? Yeah. And this is when they're babies, because you're holding, I'm just doing that work email, I just got to do that voice note. And they're getting that impression. Is it such a surprise that as they get into their tween and teen years that they want to be on their devices all the time? And then when we say put it down, they're like, but you don't. And we have
and I want to be like mum and dad.
Yeah, exactly. We are the mirror. They look and absorb everything from us, especially from the young age. And so if we're not putting those things in place from the beginning, it's going to be very difficult and also hypocritical, because we then say, you've got to get off it. And they look at us and say, but you are on it all the time, Dad. And then
which creates confusion. So what I'm thinking is, we're talking a lot about the problems and what we as people, we as parents should not be doing. Let's turn that around and think about, okay, what should we as teachers, people, adults, parents, what should we be doing? What can we do to build the resilience for young people around technology and around life?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that last point that I was making there feeds into this, and then I definitely want you to expand on this. But this idea of connect, to use your wording there, to connect with ourselves first, to start fixing ourselves, and be honest, to say, you know what, I have got a problem with this. Because if I actually objectively look at my day, and this is for everyone, but to look and say, how much of it am I on my screen? And there's tools, you can use screen time on your phone and say, oh, and I saw one pop up the other day and said, you were on your phone or you're on your screen 85% more than you were last week. And you think, huh? That's a huge number. What does that actually mean? But be honest with yourself and look at it and say, oh, wow, there's no way I was on Instagram for that long. I didn't think I was on WhatsApp for that long. And then if you break down those hours and you say, wow, then my child, that's at many points during those hours, was either with me, either in the car, or we were out or doing something, and they were watching. And so to all intents and purposes, I'm on it all the time. So I think that is very much the first step, is to be honest with ourselves, to reconnect with ourselves and say, okay, well, I need to put some things in place to manage my usage of this. And then it will reflect in what my children are seeing. And the younger they are, the the better for you as a family unit, because you can build those foundations so
Yeah.
that we're not trying to change a behavior when they are 13, 14, and they say it's not fair,
Yeah.
mum. I'm not doing that. They just understand, because the habit has been formed over years, that this is how we as a family use technology. This is
Yeah.
when we use technology. This is for how long we are able to use technology. And these are the places that we're happy to go to in the online space. And agree to that. So that actually feeds into something that we talk about, which is the acceptable use, the family acceptable use policy, that we as a family, we go through some questions and answer them as to where we go, what we do, how long we do it. And also that there are consequences for not abiding by what we as a family have agreed is the way that we will use this. And everybody signs it and says, we will not have our devices at the table. Anyone, dad signs it, mum signs it, children sign it, and we stick it on the board. And then when dad forgets and comes to the table and he's working or doing whatever, and one of the children calls him out, says, right, dad has to go, yeah, I forgot, and whatever that, right, my phone goes into a Tupperware, goes in the cupboard, and I don't have it for half an hour, and abide by it. So that what we do is we show them that it's us, not them and us. It's us together. And that we start approaching this together from that side of things. That's just one, a couple of the things I think that we can start to implement. But from your perspective, what are some of the other things that we can really, really focus on that mums, dads, families can do to sort of overcome this issue that we agree we have?
Yeah. So just to deviate very slightly, you used a very interesting word there, consequences. And, the consequences, yes, there's consequences in families. If you might have to put 10 dirham in the jar if you overstay your screen time. However, let's look at the bigger picture with consequences. Statistics are starting to come out in the UAE on the impact of burnout. And there was a report produced by Bupa just before Christmas stating 94% of top execs in the UAE have experienced mental health issues in the last year, and 20% have experienced full burnout. We're getting issues such as 50-year-old CEOs dying of a heart attack. And these are consequences. This is the reality that screen time and modern life is having on humanity. I just wanted to pick up on that word, because I think the word consequences is very, very real. And I think, we're looking at the solutions and what we can do. And I think it's really important when we're looking at solutions to remember what will happen. What are the consequences if we don't make some changes?
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah. I think that it's also, we need to be aware of those, and those are sort of big picture ones, but it's also then about bringing it back down to what we can do. And also, there's something my dad says, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And so, you can make up whatever. And I would be interested, what is it that has contributed to that burnout at 50-year-old, and how much of it is related to screen time? How much is it related to just the expectation now on a CEO to generate X $billion increase year-on-year growth?
Absolutely.
It's all contributing to this, and this idea of, the technology streamlines processes, optimize these things. So there should be more time for you to do this as a CEO, more time to do that as a CEO, and then the expectations grow. But I think you're right that the consequences are far more far-reaching than what's going on in each and every family. But it's also, especially for the work that we do, is that, if we just focus on the big picture, then it's too high level. We need to drill back down to the granular level of what can I do on a day-to-day basis to take steps to remedy this, because some of us with young children are in, I would say, a more fortunate position, because we have a chance to start building from a younger age. Those of us with teens and tweens are in it right now. We're in the firefight of what do I do? Because that age group is also, from our experience, is the generation Zers, who are the transition and the guinea pig generation, because they're at this age of physiological change, and then you've got this added layer of digital thrown in there that no one's had before as a teen and tween, and also as a parent of said teen and tween. We don't know what's going on either, and so everybody is trying to find a way, and children, as are their job, are pushing the boundaries and the limits. And unfortunately, what seems to be happening is that then there are no boundaries and limits, because mum and dad don't know where to put those boundaries and limits in some case. So we keep
Absolutely.
pushing, and
Yeah.
we're chasing each other's tails to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the meantime, some really horrible, catastrophic things are happening. And as you said, on a big picture, it's leading into these
Yeah.
scenarios. And so,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
it that we can do day to
Yeah.
day? And this is
Yeah.
idea
Sure.
of balance. But I
Yeah.
think also maybe just in terms of some of the services that you offer with Life is for Living,
Yeah.
and I want to come back to it because I think it's such an important element of what we're trying to convey here, which is this
Mm.
get away from the screen whenever you can,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and then
Yeah.
like I said, and then do what? Is there some as the examples you can not naming names, of course, but just in terms of some of the things that you've helped families with before that in this part of the world, especially because given the weather and the
Yeah.
ability to or get outside and the kind of nature that's available to us, can you just
Yeah.
expand a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, let's think about it. So we need to reconnect with ourselves. We need to reconnect with other people. We need to reconnect with nature. Let's take the three of those first. We were talking about the importance of sitting down for a meal together on a daily basis, and reconnecting with ourselves. So young people and adults are so focused on the outside world. We do not take the time to listen to ourselves, to listen to our breath, to feel. Unless we're in extreme pain, we don't stop. We don't know ourselves. So around the table, compassionate questioning can be a great one. So not just how was your day, good, bad. Okay, take it further than that. What was the best thing that happened to you today? What was the worst thing that happened to you today? And adding a and why can really help that. And things like everybody answers the question, including the parents. That way the kids get to hear the parents can set an example, and this can become something that's done every day. It could be a different question every day, and this can be really, really powerful. It's a brilliant way of showing your kids that you are listening to them. You care about what they have to say. You care about what's going on in their life. And a lot of parents will say, how was your day? Let's face it, anybody with teenagers has been through that. Make it an open question that everybody is answering, and that gives the time and the space for you and your kids. And that also helps them listen to themselves. Yeah. What was the best thing about my day? And it actually helps them to start thinking about themselves. So that's a very, very powerful one. It also improves their listening techniques, because they are then listening to what their brothers and sisters and their parents are saying in their response. And they're starting to gain an interest in other people, not just screens.
Yeah.
Other great ones is, so many parents will say, get off the screen. Okay, fantastic. Screen time is over. They've had their hour, their half hour, whatever it might be, screen time over. But I think the parents at this stage need to take it further and help the kids to open their minds. And again, it's all about open questions. All right, give me five things, 5 options that you can be doing now. Screen time's over. Give me five options. Well, I could color in. I could go and see if my friend wants to go out on their bike. I could go to the pool. I could finish my homework, or I could, and this helps them to start thinking for themselves, rather than the parent saying, right, screen time over, go and finish your homework. It helps the child to start thinking for themselves. And I think, again, that could be really powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So family time is so important, and this can really be included in connecting with nature. Yes, it can be hard in this country, of course, especially in the summer, but getting outside into the desert, around animals, around plants, is really, really important. So whenever you are out and about with your kids, make a point of acknowledging nature. Make a point of learning yourself about something. I'm sure there are things that your kids have learned at school that they can educate you on.
Yeah, they do every day.
Yeah, exactly. When you pass camels, when you pass desert plants, anything like this, reconnect with nature, be part of the place that you're in. If you can, take your kids, into the hills, into the desert, and just be part of that place where it's just you, your breath, your kids, have a laugh, play a game. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to 100% agree, because I don't know if you can see, but I've got panda eyes, because this weekend we were out in the Wadi with the kids,
Fantastic.
wandering, going for a hike and just looking at the different plants, and they were picking up rocks, and the rock became their friend, and they brought it along and then realized it was so heavy, and we went with a group of other people as well. So this is also, I think, that social element. So
exactly.
just go out. And again, to be fair, the screens are still there because people are documenting and catching photos and whatnot, but the focus was not that. And the kids didn't have the screens. Absolutely. It was them running off and doing things and looking in the pools and trying to scramble over stuff. And it was just a good couple of hours of fresh air, vitamin D, sunshine, wind, and it was just a great break from technology. So again, as an advocate of it, I value that massively, where it's not forefront of my mind. I'm not thinking about the emails or the work or the business or whatever. If I'm taking my phone out, it's to take a picture of my children doing something outside or with their friends, and I think really importantly, listening to them talking to each other. So we had a range of 3-year-olds up to 6, 9-year-olds, and they're all talking and different conversations. And if you really listen, think, wow, that's actually a pretty interesting topic of conversation they've got going on there, and an interesting viewpoint of that. And then they're seeing, the lizards running. We saw some Wadi races into the water, the camels, the goats, all of this stuff that, again, they forget about the screen for a limited period of time.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's a good thing.
And that's precious. That's absolutely precious. And I think the other element is, the more we can create these alternatives and help our kids to create their own alternatives. There's a big rock over there. Everybody grab a stone. Who gets closest to the rock? Things like this, as a parent, will help the kids' imagination to grow for themselves, and they'll start creating alternatives for themselves. They won't want to be on the screen all the time. And I think that leads to a really important thing is the word boredom. And boredom is often
took the words out of my mouth, because I was going to get into this. Exactly.
I don't think we're coming in from complete opposites, really.
We're not at all.
The concept of boredom is often seen as a negative. And actually, I think, I know science has proven that boredom can be enormously powerful and essential in creating our brain and developing our brain. It is only when we are bored that we become creative. Boredom is an enormous asset. If we can be bored and teach our kids how to be bored, whether it be sitting in a queue, waiting, at the hospital or whatever, teach them how to use their brain to occupy themselves so they don't need a screen. And that's very, very powerful. And again, this applies to adults as much as it does to young people. As adults, we pick up a screen, we're bored, we can't sleep, we pick up a screen, and the damage that's doing is huge. But sitting for 10 minutes, letting your brain wander, and then being creative, using your imagination. These days, the overuse of screen time is stopping kids having an imagination, let alone using an imagination. So boredom is great. Embrace it. Let your kids be bored.
Yeah, 100%. And I say this with mine, because they're young. They don't have their own screens or anything yet. So they do. But there is this, and I see it a lot, this overscheduling of children to make sure that they've got something to do every minute of every day. Because the parents are worried that, well, if I don't do that, then they're going to go and sit on their screen. And that's also an issue. But it's the idea of practice. And this is what I say in our family. It's like, okay, well, then just sit there. I'm bored. It's like, okay, good. Well, how long can you be bored for? And they sit there, and then it's not even scientific. I know there's science to back this up because of the development of the brain and imagination, but it's played out to us every time when they get toys and they end up playing with the box, and they turn it into a spaceship, and they push each other around, and it's a go-kart and it's a car, and then they come back to the toy, sure, but their imagination starts kicking off when the alternatives are not there. And it's also, I think, part of this empowerment is to say, look, I'm not going to tell you what to do now. You've got all of this stuff that is not screen related, toys and this, that, and the other, and games and this. Go and do something else. Oh, it's boring. Okay. And again, I get told off for this, but I say, well, only boring people get bored.
Absolutely.
And so then,
and then it's a powerful one. Yeah.
They find something. And then I always find it miraculous. And I say to my wife, I say, oh, they've been doing this for half an hour. They've been playing with cars and they've been doing this and what another, and they've not been beating each other up as brothers are wanting to do. They've actually been playing. And then if you can listen in, and I love it, I listen and I hear them talking to each other about what the concept of the game is, and it's taking this out and doing that, and they're using this stuff, and you think, fantastic. And it is, I mean, I have to walk the walk, because it's a case of, I know the technology's there, and I know my 5-year-old, he, even last Christmas, I want an iPad. And I said to him categorically, you're not having an iPad. So you can, whatever you want to think about it, but that idea out of your mind, because you're not getting an iPad for your birthday at 5 years old. Yeah. And again, he kind of said, okay, and accepted it. And I know that at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, when that question comes, or even before that, because schools are almost making it mandatory that you have to bring your own device, that a conversation will have to be had. And then at that point, very strict user guidelines will be implemented for that device, and it will not be handed over without the user manual, I suppose. And that user manual coming from mum and dad, not from Apple or Samsung or whoever makes the thing, is that this is what we'll again be able to use it for and when. And so it's this balance. I think this is something that we came back to, is that there are benefits to it, and there are certain situations where it works in our favor, but it's this overuse, misuse of the technology that's causing issues on a much, much grander scale. But I also, and this is, I think, the conclusion we came to previously, is that we can't do nothing. The issue is so massive that
absolutely
you think can we solve it? And part of it's like, yes, we can, but it's a long, long, long game. And that game requires small steps taken by each and every one of us on a daily basis, to your point before, because it's something that is impacting our life every day. People in schools even say, well, how often should we be talking about this subject? And it's like, well, how often are children looking at a screen and going online? Well, every day. That's the answer. Absolutely. I know it's not realistic, because there's other subjects that have to be taken care of and talked about, but as much as possible. And this is where I think mum and dad come into this picture as being the missing link to a certain extent, is that those conversations happen at the family level. And again, from that side of things, it's to your point of family time. One of the areas that we focused on is this idea of it's called we time, not me time. Instead of giving your child a device and saying, right, go off and do something, is that to show them that you're not anti-technology. It's like, right, well, we're going to watch a video or read a video book together, and I'm going to be there and you're going to be there, and we're going to use the screen. So we're not anti-screen, we're not anti-technology, but this is something that is on the approved list of things to do.
Yeah, I like that.
And so we embrace the technology, and then we go through, and again, it's much bigger than this episode, but this idea of digital free zones and digital detox times, where we're moving away from that, and boredom comes into it, and then mum and dad providing certain tasks, but then also saying, right, you decide, you go, and you've got time now to go and do something. I'm not telling you what to do. And we're very much at that stage with our 5-year-olds. Like, what can I do? So I don't know. What can you do? And that's not fair, Dad. That's not the question. But it's me consciously catching myself in that situation of allowing him to come up with a solution. Because as we said right at the beginning, that's key to this, because we're not there all the time. And the longer that we do everything for them, the harder it's going to be for them to figure out how to do it for themselves. And that's just
absolutely
evolution from that side of things to grow. Like, the longer I keep tying your shoelace, the longer it's going to be until you figure out how to tie your shoelace. And so, yes, I will do it for a certain period of time, and I will show you 1,000,000 times.
Yeah.
And then you need to take that initiative to do it. And that, I think, plays out across everything.
Yeah. But I think there's so much more to it than that. I think if you are actively saying to your son, what do you think the answer is? The power of empowerment that the child is receiving from there, Dad believes in me. And that's very powerful. Compared to somebody who is receiving this controlling advice from the parent all the time, and if that's all they receive, again, that can lead to very much no belief in themselves. Whereas if you're giving the child the chance to open their mind and give you the answer, and you're saying, okay, yeah, go with it. Yeah. The positive affirmation that the child is receiving from the parent in that situation is very, very powerful.
Yeah. Agreed. I think one of the things I find interesting about this, because I come from that, not authoritarian, but that more disciplined approach. And my wife, for sure. And again, I know that 9 times out of 10, my approach is not the right approach. And she tells me that, the idea of empowerment and mindfulness, and I agree, they're so important. I guess my question, because I'm struggling with this, is where's the balance in that, in terms of how many times do you explain and go through it with your 5-year-old before the answer is no, this is the reason why the answer is no, and we've gone over it 5 times. How is it that we then continue to provide them with the ability to come up with the answer themselves, or internalize that, I suppose? I don't know if that's a valid question. I guess it's just about this balance of empowerment and then guidelines for where's the limit. I suppose I'm thinking out loud. But I mean, do you have an answer for that from that side of things?
I mean, every situation is so unique. I think this is the problem. And I think a lot of it, depends on the amount of time and patience that the parent has. And I think this leads into kind of a big part of the problem as to why we are where we are today is our time is so limited. We have become these greedy animals who want more and more and more. The more we have, the more we want. And I think this is part of the problem. And I think possibly the lesson there is to ourselves and to our kids, we don't need more. I guess that's a big lesson is, okay, you can have more, but the ability to say no. I was with a family the other day, and one of the kids was asked, do you want a bike? And he said, actually, no, I don't need one at the moment. And I just thought, wow, fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. And I think we're caught up in this, sorry, I'm deviating slightly, but we're caught up in this world where we want. And if we can have, we take. And I think there's a big lesson there in teaching ourselves and our kids to be happy with what we've got and not, to move away from this concept of greed. But to go back to your question about, empowering your kids and helping your kids to think for themselves, arguably does take more energy from yourself than, sometimes it is just easier to do it yourself. Absolutely. So I think it does depend on what's going on yourself. In the long term, you're going to get a lot more out of it by empowering your kid to tie their own shoelace if you spend that time teaching them. And you might have to teach them 3 or 4 times. And yes, that's going to be a pain because you've already taught them once, you've already taught them twice. And it might be, and this is something I've seen a lot, that they ask you to teach them again because actually they want some attention. And that's something to be aware of, to what extent are they needing to be taught again, and to what extent do they need a hug? So I guess that's something to be aware of. Is your child asking for your attention because they need the help with something, or because they want your attention? And this leads on to something that I heard a lot when I was growing up is, oh, they are just attention seeking. And I think this was a cultural phrase that was used a lot, not just in my family. And I think about that phrase now with my knowledge and understanding. And I think if a child is attention seeking, they are attention seeking for a reason, and they need attention. And if a child needs a hug, if they need somebody to listen to them, if they need to just sit with somebody, then give them what they need. That is huge. I don't believe in this idea that a child is negative because they are attention seeking. Children have needs, and they don't have the vocabulary to ask to have their needs met until they're in their 20s and 30s. So if a child is screaming, if they are tying their shoelace, asking you to tie their shoelace 25 times, if there are signs of needing attention, find a way to give them attention.
Yeah.
Is my advice.
No, and it is absolutely spot on, because and this is also part of that mindfulness approach from a parent's perspective, to understand that and recognize it. That sometimes it's not what is being said. And I incorporate this into some of the things that we talk to parents about the physiological development of our children and the expectations that we put on them as parents being quite unrealistic in a lot of cases, because they can't deal with certain things that we take for granted. We go, oh yeah, well, I know they're a child. So, yeah, but you're still expecting them to reason around the situation, that their brain, the amygdala, the part of the brain that's in the prefrontal cortex, is not developed enough to do that. So asking your 13-year-old to do that and expecting them to go, oh yeah, Dad, I get it, and I'll do that instead. And you think, oh good, yeah, that's what I expected to happen. They go, well, what are you talking about? And they can't do it. And they said, oh, they're so, they're disruptive, they don't listen and listen, but they're actually incapable of doing that. And I think that we, in some cases, need to just have that at front of mind when we are talking with our children, to understand that sometimes what we are projecting is not realistic. And then, of course, they can't live up to that. And so then we're disappointed because they're not listening or they're not doing it. And actually, it was a non-starter to begin with, because we set them up to fail effectively. So they can't do that. They don't know how to do that. And it doesn't make sense in their brain, because, to your point, until they're 25, that part of the brain isn't fully developed. And so by which stage, mum and dad, their influence is perhaps waned a little bit. And this idea of, I think it sort of brings it right back to the beginning. It's this idea of finding a way to communicate to and with your children, and for them to connect and communicate with you as mum and dad, or caregivers or aunties, uncles. It doesn't have to be mum and dad. Anyone that has a young person that they care about in their life, this is applicable to, because globally as well, children have access to the internet and screens. And so this is not a UAE specific problem, or UK or US. It's a global issue that we have. And we just got to find a way to take small steps on a daily basis, I think, to try and remedy from that. But anything else that you wanted to share, Maz, at this point in terms?
Yeah, there was just one thing that came to my head just speaking now, is you mentioned the word impact, and I was thinking back, and some of the most impactful experiences that have come out from people's childhoods have been outdoor walks or cycles, where the kid might have been screaming the whole way and it was a slog and they didn't want to be there, but they don't remember it like that. They remember it as one of the most powerful memories in their life. Do you remember the time we went up to that cave? And I guess the message there is, don't try and make everything easy, because life is not easy. And actually, it's about letting your kid experience the hard times, letting the kid struggle to climb to the top of the hill. Because when they get there, they've learned how to do it. They've learned they can do it. They've learned that if you persevere, you will achieve. There's so many lessons to be learned. And the number of people that I've spoken to who look back and they mentioned these hard times in their childhood when they achieved something, but it was hard and they hated going up that hill, and yet they talk about it with such a fond memory. So embrace the things that are hard, as well as making life easy.
Yeah, very, very, very good advice. And I think that I'm just conscious of the time, because I think that opens also up another avenue to talk about in terms of this idea of perseverance and doing things, because there is some correlation to, and again, it's a whole other topic about online gaming and the ability to develop some of those skills through those kind of things in terms of perseverance and getting up a level and beating the boss and this kind of stuff that there is. But again, we'll do another one, because it is so much to talk about. But I think that hopefully from a listener perspective, there's some useful information in there, because I think what your experience, Maz, and what you've created and what you can bring to the table is so, and why we're doing this is so in line with the messaging that we've been putting out there as Beat the Cyberbully for the last 9 or so years. and
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
even more so than ever, this idea of connection is so needed. And any way that
Absolutely.
we can talk about this
Yeah.
at length,
Yeah.
because I know we could just carry on going, but we'll chop it into small chunks so people can listen to it wherever they are. But thanks, Maz. Thanks very much for your time on this,
Oh,
and we'll do it
brilliant.
again.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Fantastic.
Maz.
Excellent. It's been great, and we'll chat soon.